They're coming, and it's all I need. Everything I wanted.
That's so loud, dude. It's good. It's such a good thing.
Oh,
My
I
ears.
hope this is good.
My
Be
ears are
careful.
bleeding. Ow.
It could be absolutely terrible. Episode 3, because I misnumbered. Episode 1 and 2 were both called 1. Should we audit Fort Knox? That's the question. And how would Bitcoin make that better? I think that's where we're starting today.
I don't know.
Didn't they just have inflows of 2,000 tons of gold in the last 3 or 4 months or something?
Yeah.
I feel like
What I read is that, or I think the conspiracy theory going around right now is that they're flying. That's why there's a shortage of gold in London or whatever. Is they're
comics,
like
yeah.
flying the gold over here to like pretend like it's there. Like what a fuck. The most fiat fucking bunch of nonsense I've ever heard.
A gold bar is like this big. You could wrap lead, tungsten, whatever. How, if you have like thousands of bars, nobody could ever know that it's really gold or not.
Yeah.
The only thing that matters for anybody at this point in the game is the optics of like Elon said, like, oh yeah, live streaming of Fort Knox would be awesome. Like it's just the optics. That the only thing that matters. Nobody actually cares if there's gold there or not. Like you just, we're just gonna have a bunch of Hollywood. Anton, you don't even need to wrap it. You can like literally just get blocks of wood and paint it gold, and it looks great on camera because that's the only thing that's gonna matter.
Yeah.
Have you ever lifted gold?
It's
How
heavy
heavy
as
it is?
Fuck. The
You
bar of
couldn't
gold
even-
is impossible.
So if you have like 2 bars and then underneath it, you got 10, 20 bars, you're never going to see the other bars anyway.
I guess the question really is what's the point? Okay, so do it or don't do it, what the fuck ever. But what do we gain out of that?
Our currency isn't backed by gold.
Yeah.
What does the gold even matter?
I
It's
guess
our gold, Anton. It's our gold.
It's not mine.
It's my gold and your gold.
it's our gold.
Oh,
Our government, who habitually steals hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars from us, has no, it's the people's gold. It's we need to make sure. We need to make sure that's the people's gold, that it's still there. Yeah, we got
Well,
to
they
be
leverage
careful.
the
we have no
gold for the
proof that the
loans to buy
government
the
has stolen
nukes.
any money ever. We have no proof whatsoever. So
No.
let's just be,
Yeah.
above board on that.
I heard a good one from that guy Santiago Capital. He was like, it's going to be funny when they audit the gold and there's more gold in there than there's supposed to be.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It's like I don't know. The only interesting thing I've heard on it is if they just decide to like reprice everything, if they decide to try to use gold as collateral again, and then just reprice all the gold at 10,000 an ounce or whatever.
Yeah. I would have to.
But again, like how does that solve anything? What does that do to the treasury market? Like, I don't know. I'm not that smart, but like, I don't know. It just feels like theater to me. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, theater.
I have the GLD ETF in an IRA. I would love for them to reprice gold at $10,000 an ounce. But I don't know what that actually does other than just enrich people that hold the E ETF.
No, the way nobody in the ETF would get enriched. The only people who would get enriched are the government. Nobody else would get enriched. There's no point in doing it if everybody gets enriched. The only way you do it is if the government gets enriched.
But if the price of gold just gets set to $10,000 an ounce,
Of course,
Wouldn't
but what they're
anybody
gonna
even
do, what
hold
they
an
would do,
ETF?
they'd be like, "Oh yeah, cool, we're gonna chop down." Actually, sorry, your gold ETF, like it was pegged to this, but because the government's doing this thing, we had to unpeg it to that. So now it's, oh yeah, you had 100 shares, but it's actually worth whatever 70 shares of gold now. Sorry.
I think
so.
I think
Yeah.
part of the Bitcoin thesis, at least in my mind, is that the government they have to print, right? We've got hundreds of trillions of unfunded liabilities. They have to create more monetary units.
Yeah.
And that the only way to do that where there isn't a revolution and there isn't, earth-shattering inflation is that they have as many of the people in that society, let's say it's the United States, who own the asset that's getting inflated over time. So their purchasing power doesn't go down. It's just a boat on a lake of water, and then they can continue their bookkeeping shenanigans, because it's all just bookkeeping, right? But I think it does help them from an inflationary perspective if they have the assets spread around to as many people as possible, right? Like let's just run the hypothetical, right? Like let's say they get Bitcoin into a bunch of retirement accounts, and then you have this like infinite bid, kind of like the S&P. Americans are buying this, weekly in their retirement accounts. Everybody owns a little bit of Bitcoin, and over the next 30 or 40 years, they can print a bunch of money. The value of Bitcoin goes up. People's purchasing power or their wealth feels like it hasn't gone down. I think you could make the argument that gold would do that as well, just price wise. But again,
That's
There's another thing that's interesting about gold in that it's generationally, like millennials literally have Bitcoin and boomers do not. Most of them do not get it, but they do have gold and they get gold, especially if they've been investing for a long time. They understand, the systemic risks of things and all this other stuff. They're like, okay, cool. When things get really inflationary, obviously you go to gold. So, but to your thesis of 20 to 40 years out, well, there's no more boomers with us 20 to 20 years out, honestly.
Yeah.
So what does that do to gold?
Yeah, I think gold's done. It's over. We're in the information age. We're in the digital age. We're no longer using an analog store of value. I think it's done. It's dead. They gotta let it go. And hey, maybe it's just a giant smokescreen. While the U.S. continues to accumulate Bitcoin and U.S. citizens continue to accumulate Bitcoin, and more importantly, U.S. corporations accumulate Bitcoin.
That is actually the one thing that I was thinking about a lot today was the everybody's talking about GME. Is GameStop gonna actually do something? And I think what's fascinating about that though is it's corporate theater for sure. Ryan Cohen could come on and just be like, we're gonna buy a bunch of Bitcoin, and it's like it's gonna drive the price up for a second. But it's not corporate theater that can be ignored, because as soon as somebody does that, as soon as a GME with 4.7 billion, I think is what they have on their books, just book value of cash. As soon as somebody that's not Sailor, that's more of a mainstream retail outlet, starts just piling on the Bitcoin, the space race for Bitcoin begins, in my opinion. Because it's Apple can't ignore that. If Utah starts buying, I think I just saw Utah is one vote away from actually starting to put Bitcoin on their books. I think there's a couple other I can't remember the account. There's a couple accounts that are tracking the Bitcoin strategic reserves for the for the states. I think you're right though, Zach, in that it's a marketing. I think it actually is a marketing problem. And the problem that Trump is in is the Fort Knox to me feels like the Gulf of America. And what I mean by that is I want the dumbest people in the world to just scream at me for something stupid, like going into Fort Knox and auditing it, or renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, so I can do my actual work, which in this case, in my opinion, monetarily is buying Bitcoin. So I do actually think it's political theater. Intentionally, because we've talked about this at our meetup. I don't think a Bitcoin strategic reserve for America happens until 2027, and the reason for that, in my opinion, is they're stacking their asses off in the background. Because the second a Bitcoin strategic reserve happens, the price skyrockets. The second it's the U.S. is doing an SBR, it's over.
Well, I think I'm very much on the corporations are more important than individuals or governments buying Bitcoin. The corporations, the corporate world has much more collateral. There's much more money for them to borrow money against their current balance sheet to buy Bitcoin than a government can just go and print money. Mm-hmm. But I think the key thing here is that the actual best way, to my point previously about getting as many people on the boat to protect themselves against inflation, is to just get the corporations that are already in these index funds to own Bitcoin. Because now that's the easiest way to get every normie who's never going to buy Bitcoin on their own or even care about Bitcoin to own Bitcoin. Because now the stocks of the companies that own Bitcoin are going to start rising with the price of Bitcoin. And all of the people who have retirement accounts or stocks that is comprised of all of these companies owning Bitcoin, that's going to protect them from inflation more than convincing a bunch of people to buy the thing. So I think their mission has to be get it onto the balance sheet of as many corporations as possible in the United States before they turn on the spigot, before they turn on the money printer. And that protects American citizens who are invested against the worst parts of inflation.
Yeah. Do you guys think we can do what Elon is saying, where we're going to have a 0% inflation year? Is that going to happen, or is that just, more bloviating?
I don't think so.
So in a post like Bitcoin hyper Bitcoinization world, every currency has to be 0%. And that's like, it's like a Nash equilibrium thing where it's like, if you have a currency that's more than 0%, well, you're fucking yourself. Like, everybody knows that like, you're not competitive. Everyone's going to sell your currency for the 0% currency. So there's no reason.
Yeah, currencies become like a stable coin, basically.
Yeah, there's no reason for any of it in a post hyper Bitcoinization world. Now, until we get that place, until like the economics of scale and efficient economics like play their roles, like where everyone kind of knows this. Until we get to the place where everyone knows it, it's not going to matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too, you gotta keep in mind that we're still in a debt-based system, and if you start to see, we're saying inflation at 0%, but like we have to define what that means. You can't. It would be a catastrophic problem if you started to see housing go through a deflationary situation. That totally fucks the entire system. That fucks the banks. That fucks everybody who has a mortgage. They can't have that. So, maybe the price of eggs goes down, like maybe, things that are produced and manufactured, like, okay, that's cool. But you still got to keep in mind that most of those businesses are in debt. They're borrowing money to run their businesses, and, they just can't have debt. They can't have the debt deflate, or the banking system collapses. So, I think it has to be this really long-term, like the plane we're at's already at 35,000 feet. We're trying to get everybody onto another plane, but you can't land the plane. You have to do it in air, and it's going to take a long time to do that.
So what you're saying is we shouldn't put DEI in the cockpit and send them to Toronto from.
I'm a merit-based individual. Whoever the best pilot is, let them fly it.
Hey, let's be real though. They all survived, right? The plane looked a little jank when it was done, but. Yeah.
It'll fly again. It's good. It's good to go.
Oh, yeah, just put some duct tape on it.
So this is one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is like the nature of debt and how much that's going to change, because literally our entire world is literally predicated on debt. Like I've had this thought experiment that I've just kind of like runs in the back of my mind, like when I'm out about. Like yesterday I was in Westwood, right? And I was like, oh, I wonder how much a home is in Westwood. Like, what's the real estate here? And it's like $5 million for like a 3-bedroom home. It's like, this is insane. And then you try and think about that. Like, how can you justify those prices? Okay, so it's like, well, that person they have to make over $500,000 a year just to like afford the down payment on a house like that, right? Okay, well, but then it's like, so it's not that. It's like the reality of the situation is that they're in, to buy a house like that, you have to have, you're in $2, $3, $4 million of debt, right? Now, to Zach's point, your life is over if the debt is not inflating away. Like it's like your life is literally over. You will never be able to, especially if the currency itself is a deflationary currency like Bitcoin, and your debt is denominated in a deflationary currency, your life is over. Okay, so how does this play out going forward? Like, what are we going to be like? You know, is there a potential for a black swan event where it's just like, nope, we're all going, like, all currencies go to 0% inflation because they can't sustain it to anybody, and then everybody gets fucked who's in debt, which is literally everybody. The thought experiment is like, including the banks and everybody else. So you know, is there some real risk there? Like, how do you even quantify that risk? Because this is an existential risk to the entire system, right?
I want to play that out. So let's say that happens, you know, on January 4th for whatever reason. Or sorry, July 4th for whatever reason. You know, just we have an Independence Day crash. What's interesting to me about that as a thought experiment is, like, say for some reason we have the banks are closed, everything's broken, we have a monetary incident where we have Weimar hyperinflation overnight. What's interesting to me about that is we have the ETFs and we have the owner of the majority of the banking system, BlackRock and Fidelity, like that commingled cohort of the banks, right? Because they are, who's the largest holder of JP Morgan Chase? BlackRock. Who's the largest holder of Citibank? BlackRock. It's like, they have BlackRock on their books, right? Or like BlackRock has everybody on their books and they're all on everybody's books. It's just this commingled crazy. Like, what do you think that, like, so what then happens on January 6th or July 6th when the markets open? Like, you know, what happens?
I mean, I don't think that Weimar's done. That mechanic is done. That's over. The risk is not to the downside. The risk is to the upside, that we have a melt up. Because they have to protect the institutions, they're going to have to continue to print more money to make sure that their balance sheets aren't at zero and that there isn't a revolution in the streets. That's what they have to protect themselves against. And I don't see a 20 style crash or a Weimar style crash downwards.
I'm talking up, by the way. Weimar was up, Weimar wasn't down.
Yeah, but I mean in terms of purchasing power. So, you know, like, you can't. I don't think it happens. Excuse me. I don't think that it happens overnight. I think they pretty much, you know, okay, go back to 2008, right? They had never printed that much money. They had never created a legal facility to do that before. And now that's like the primary tool in their bag, right? Just shore up the balance sheets. We saw this, you know, with the BTFP or whatever, the BTFP program, where they're going to come up with more sophisticated ways of just papering over the cracks. And I don't see that happening instantly. And I think, I would go so far as to say that I think that they're trying to, this is a controlled demolition of the current system, and they want to do it as orderly as they possibly can.
Do you think they will be successful?
Yeah,
I guess that's a greater question.
I do. Yeah.
How could they fail?
Yeah,
That's a better question.
Yeah, they de facto have to be successful. The legacy system is entirely centrally controlled. Like, there's no, it's like, oh, you're too big to fail. Like, that exists. Like, it's just, oh, we can just not have this bank fail because it's all 100% centrally controlled. So, like, that system is going to continue on however it continues on. And it's going to, you know, be less and less relevant as it continues on, but it's not going to be like, to Zach's point, there's no Weimar collapse and any of that. That's just goofy.
I think the way that it fails is you elect somebody like Kamala, right? You elect a bunch of leftists and people who are like depopulationists who don't understand how the current system works and want the system to collapse in the first place. Like, deep down in their hearts, they want there to be chaos and destruction. I think that's how it fails. But if you have, you know, people who understand the dynamic running things, like, you know, I mean, look at Trump's cabinet, right? You got Lutnick, you know, all of these people understand how the system works. And it's certainly not in their interest to let the thing collapse. So I think the biggest threat is who's in charge. You know, and I don't know, like, you guys remember Game of Thrones? There's that scene where it was so prescient. Like, there's all this chaos going on. There's all this war, and then they have to go to the bank, whatever that city was called, and like borrow money for the war. And it's like, oh man, they totally nailed that. Which is to say, the bank, if evil people are running the world and they want things to be destroyed, then the banks are going to do what the banks are going to do, which is they're going to lend to both sides, and whoever wins owes them a bunch of money. That's, I think, the worst outcome possible. But if you don't have a bunch of total psychopaths running the thing, they make the banks happy, they make themselves happy, and we do this long transition into a new monetary world order, which is pretty clearly what's happening.
Do you think the Rockefellers have a fat stack?
I don't know. Probably. Why wouldn't they?
I'm pretty sure they've had Bitcoin exposure since GBTC was launched originally, through various whatever shell companies, etc. They had like a substantial amount of GBTC shortly after it was launched. Yeah,
it's like the Walt Disney of buying real estate.
And kind of back to my point, right? Like Rockefeller has exposure to all of these other companies. So the key thing is to make sure that Bitcoin is on the balance sheet of all the big companies. Rockefeller already owns everything else. So just make sure that the people they own Bitcoin, and then now they own it.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I think that's kind of where I was trying to go with the question is, I guess it's like, what kind of an incident would it take for the people to be like, the emperor has no clothes on? I do think Fort Knox is one of those moments where it's like, there's nothing here. And I don't think that would be good. And if that was the case, I don't think Trump would do a walkthrough of Fort Knox, right? Like, they're not going to do a walkthrough of Fort Knox if it's empty, right?
Something else that could happen, though, is that they can do a walkthrough of Fort Knox, and everybody, I mean, you can already look at videos of them doing like whatever the gold depository in England is. They can do a walkthrough, and people will be like, there are these undecorative pallets of what look like bricks just sitting on the ground. There's nothing special about it. And then people start talking about it, and they're like, wait, we're not on a gold standard anymore. What is this? What does this gold actually do? It doesn't do anything. And then people start thinking about it, and they're like, wait a second, we're not on a gold standard anymore. The gold doesn't have any meaning. And so it might actually end up doing the opposite of what they want it to do by showing that it's actually there. It may lose all of its meaning and luster, for lack of a better term.
Do you think enough people are smart enough for that, though? And it's like, I don't mean that in a mean way, but there are a very large contingent, and I would argue probably 70 to 80% of people in the world who just want to punch a time card and be told what to do and where to go and what to eat, and that McDonald's is healthy for you and all that stuff. Like, are there enough people to actually like they have faith in this system because it's just easier? It takes all the processing power off of their brains, and they're just like, cool, this is great.
Yeah, that's most people. I mean, most people are they're just using the dollar out of total convenience. And as long as everything semi operates the way that it does, whether inflation's 2% or 8%, they don't rise up. It's like we watched house prices double over the last 2 years, grocery prices triple, and nothing changed. So yeah, I mean, this whole Fort Knox thing will be a very slow. It'll be just a little piece of the awakening for everybody to realize that what we've all already realized. So it's just, I don't think it's going to like be this fundamental change in everybody's mentality. It's just one more thing to make people just take a second to question why our currency has any value.
Yeah, I mean, like who was it? Maxine Waters or somebody was like, the Federal Reserve Bank is a government-run institution, and
Waters.
It's just like, no,
Yeah.
you don't even understand how any of this stuff works. And then to Anton's points, it's like there's like a whole other level to it where it's like not only do people think that the Federal Reserve is a government institution, they also believe that the reason any money has value is because it's backed by gold, or government bonds, or it's backed. Like that's what makes currency have value, because it's backed.
Most people think we're on a gold standard. Most people think we are still on a gold standard. We haven't been on a gold standard in more than 50 years, and people still don't even know.
Not only did they
inflation's
think we're
been
on a
just
gold
slow
standard,
enough.
not only do they think we're on a gold standard, but they don't even know what that would mean anyway. They just go like,
Right,
oh, I think
right.
it's like they wouldn't even know how to unpack it past what does a gold standard mean.
Yeah.
Sorry, going back, JD. According to Grok, the Rockefeller family has exposure to Bitcoin and the broader cryptocurrency market through their venture capital firm Venrock. In 2018, Venrock announced a partnership with CoinFund, a Brooklyn-based cryptocurrency investment firm focused on financing blockchain-based businesses. So yeah, fuck yeah. Okay, to my point, their main thing.
CoinFund is a bunch of shitcoiners, but yeah.
They need to. The government needs to make sure that people aren't starving to death and killing each other in the streets. Like they need to make sure that there's not a giant revolution, and it's going to be bumpy. But most people don't. Most human beings are not violent. They don't want to have a revolution. They're not going to fight. If you look at what happened in Weimar and how fucking horrible that inflation was, I mean, people were literally selling their children, like in the sex trade to make money. Like, shit was incredibly bad.
It was Venezuela. That's exactly what happened and started happening in Venezuela too. It's wild the rhyming of history there, where it's like Venezuela and now we're like 50 years apart, something like that. Maybe 100 years apart. Not they weren't 100 years, but what? Because Weimar was 1920, like it was before World War II, so it was like 1914, right? So the 10s.
Yeah, 10s
and then
mid 20s.
And then Venezuela, when was that? Early 2000s was when their stuff went out. So 70, 80, or a fourth turning, basically 80 years.
I think the thing too is like they're not concerned about what a bunch of people who don't understand how the system works and don't have any material wealth think anyway. They only give a shit about the 20 or 30% of people who have wealth. That's who they have to convince to do a different thing, and everybody else will follow along. They have to. They don't have a choice.
Yeah.
You know what's really interesting about where we are right now with the extremely wealthy class? They're so unimaginably wealthy. Like we can't even picture what it would be like to have an income of $1 billion or what some of these people have. But they're not living in castles. They have private jets and they have a few houses and they have like a place in Aspen and they ski and maybe they have a yacht and everything. But it's not ostentatious wealth. Like when you see Jamie Dimon or something, you're like, I mean, he's wearing a suit, but he doesn't look that nice. Like, so it's just interesting to me that we as Bitcoiners, we think of like citadels and stuff for when there's hyper Bitcoinization, but they're being sly enough to not show how extreme the wealth is.
Yeah.
They don't do it in the United States. They do it in Monaco and the Caribbean and where their fucking boats are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. It's wild the wealth, but I think the difference is actually kind of what Zach was talking about is back then you essentially had to have a fiefdom. You had to have serfs. You had to have people. You had to have knights who were willing to die for you. Like you actually had to have meat hooks of people to come in there and just like wreck shop if somebody wanted to, try to conquer your land, because we didn't have these massive institutions of governments. And a great book is Snow Crash. I'm listening to it right now, and it kind of goes through what happens. That's actually where the word metaverse was coined. Was that book by Neil Stephenson? And it's just fascinating to kind of like he kind of unpacks a little bit of a return to that and like what it looks like. And I don't think he's wrong. It kind of follows right along with the sovereign individual thesis of governments kind of become these entities that need to actually like provide value for their customers, i.e. the taxpayers. And I think we're actually kind of like starting to see the chinks in the armor right now, where we're seeing this massive we are literally watching the Cantillon effect being proven in front of our eyes through Doge. Like we are watching it in lifetime being exposed.
Yeah.
And I hope to God people can get mad enough that it can stop. And the only way it stops, though, is actually if people stop paying their taxes. If people stop just like accepting that what I'm being told is true. And, we're seeing a little bit of that with like X, like this platform and some of the other platforms. But the problem is like X is such a small microcosm, like Nostr is such a small microcosm of people that it's going to take more Elons and more Satoshis to kind of get us there. And I guess that's, my bigger question from before, like if it happened on July 4th is maybe like wishful thinking or aspirational thinking, because I don't want to go back to what we have. We don't need more Nancy Pelosi's.
I don't think we can avoid going back as long as we're on a fiat standard. The only reason USAID and all this other stuff can exist is because of fiat.
Yeah.
The only reason that the Treasury can lose $4.7 billion or trillion or whatever, because they didn't like add the database entry, is because fiat is literally BS money to start with. Like until the fundamental problem, which is the errors in the currency, the lack of technological soundness in the currency, until that's solved, you're always going to end up with USAID like pumping billions of dollars into whatever.
Yeah, they can lose $2 billion into the Pentagon that they can't audit, and literally they can just print $2 billion like that, and it's just restored. It's all good. If you lose $2 billion equivalent worth of Bitcoin, if you like delete a wallet or something, it's gone forever. And we're currently in a world where for the people who are printing the money, the numbers don't matter. And we're soon to be in a world.
No consequences.
And, and the thing is that in this system, the money is created against collateral. And that's how all of this money, a tremendous amount of the money enters the system, is that the banks have the ability to create money from nothing against some kind of collateral. If you take that away, the entire game changes. And that's kind of my point. Like the crash, it's going to be such a long process because that's not going away anytime soon. All of these companies and where the people who have the real power, who can, they don't need to have an income of $1 billion a year. They have $5 billion worth of assets, and they can just go get a loan against any of it at nothing % and do whatever the fuck they want. And the only reason that's possible is because the bank can print the money from nothing. It's not pulling it from depositors. It's not pulling it from somewhere else. So, it's like, it's like Jeff Booth's point, right? You've got two completely opposite forces at play here. And I think they know that. I think they understand that. And I think that they're going to, I was saying this at the meetup, but Bitcoin and the dollar need each other right now. Bitcoin needs to be used as collateral to print more dollars, to continue to pump the price of Bitcoin to the point where it's worth 5 or 10 or 15 or $20 million. And the people who run the system now are going to see Bitcoin as a better form of collateral. And then eventually Bitcoin will the dollar will just eventually poof gone because Bitcoin will have so much more value. And then it's question mark, because at that point, I don't know if we go into just a full-blown Bitcoin deflationary standard, or if they continue to try to manage currencies against Bitcoin and using Bitcoin as collateral. So I think that's very hard to predict what happens
right
in that
now.
scenario.
You have so let's say you have 5 Bitcoin or 10 Bitcoin or whatever, and maybe you have a friend who's worth $100 million, and maybe he puts 100,000 into Bitcoin and buys a Bitcoin. Well, your friend with $100 million is still way richer than you are, and probably $100 million is in assets that are paying him cash flow, and he's just balling out of control. If all of a sudden there's a hyper Bitcoinization, and now you technically have more Bitcoin, he still has the assets, but you now have more Bitcoin, and your net worth is higher than his net worth. If this thing happens, which we all believe is going to happen, what do you think happens to the system when all of a sudden you have Bitcoiners all over the world and there's this leveled playing field of wealth? The wealthy people still have the assets, but now the Bitcoiners have basically just a higher net worth to where they can also compete for assets. What happens then?
You have a total repricing of everything on the planet, and you have a bunch of Bitcoiners who are going to start buying shit at a fire sale. and you're going to have a totally different cohort
Yeah.
mentality who's going to be in charge of these businesses.
Yeah, they're going to try and change or retool all of these businesses to convert their cash flow from US dollars, which will be trash. All their contracts will just be completely decimated because of the inflation in US dollars. They'll convert all that to Bitcoin cash flow. Cool. You want to get your car washed at our car wash? Hey, we got, it's going to be whatever, 1,000 sats,
I think what's
Yeah, that'll be
interesting about
super-
that is, and sorry, I'm fighting a cold, so it's like every 5 seconds I love getting punched in the face, like I have to sneeze.
Just do it. Just sneeze.
What's going to be interesting, and I'm going to use IndieHub as an example, and I was actually thinking about IndieHub when I was getting off the highway earlier today because of the. I had a professor in college, Merlin Mann. What a freaking awesome name!
What a name, dude!
Dude, he was freaking the best.
Names their kid Merlin.
Merlin Mann, dude. Let's go.
But he, I started in J school, so I started in journalism school, and then like 2 years in, I was like, "This is a crock," and I was like, "If I want to make stuff up, I'm just gonna make stuff up," and so that's when I switched to business. But that's literally my thought, and
that's when I switched to filmmaking.
yeah, I was like, filmmaking. I want to do propaganda. Let's just do propaganda. And where I was going with this is Merlin had the idea as a journalist, because he'd worked for newspapers for a long time. He was like, whoever can figure out, this was before, and Bitcoin, I guess, it wasn't even out yet because this was before Bitcoin. But he's like, whoever can figure out microtransactions to where it's like you want to go to the New York Times website and you're going to pay a couple pennies to read an article, right? Whoever can figure out the microtransaction thing, and I do think that's where we're going, and that's IndieHub, right? It's the microtransaction, and I think we're going to get to a world where that has to be the norm or rather, is more convenient as the norm because you can be completely anonymous in some way, shape, or form, and try to get into an Uber or try to get into a self-driving car and just pay per mile or pay per whatever, right? And it's just like slowly deducted from your account because people are going to get to a formalized understanding of what value really is. And it'll be super convenient. Like I'm actually really excited about the convenience of the future because I'm not going to have to spend $19.99 a month for crap I'm not going to use. Okay, great. There's 50 million movies on whatever it is. I don't care. But I can spend, in aggregate, like $9.04 every month because that's what I watched, my consumption. So it's like consumption-based, compensation and consumption-based, like value is going to be the future. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
Now they can auto debit your card right now. Like there's so many cloud things, iCloud, Google, whatever thing. And it's like $2.99 here, $1.99 here, $10.99 here. And it just comes out. And I'm like looking at my statements. I'm like, what are all these things? Well, in the near future, when we're paying, we have to like press a button and allow that transaction to go through. They can't just take that money. And so it's going to be our choice, what you're saying, the exact things that we want to pay for.
Yep. Yeah, and we're going to feel pain again. I actually think we get back to feeling pain. And that's actually a good thing. Like the reason, I did a bunch of things with credit cards back in the day with credit card companies. And the reason they do the dip and now actually why they're changing to the tap, because at the time it was just when the dip was being introduced in the United States, is because essentially it's a 4% increase in spend every single time they change the action to be faster. So like the swipe was 4% more, and then the dip was 4% more. And it's like in aggregate, it's actually like you're spending 12% more money because of the tap.
Yeah.
Versus what you spent even when you slid the card. It's like because the sliding was kind of a pain in the ass. It didn't work. You had to like blow on it. It was like an NES game. And now you actually just like tap and walk away. And it's wild.
And it makes sense.
And that literally has never worked for me. Every single time I've tried to tap, it never works, and I just have to insert my card and just wait.
So funny.
It makes sense. Like think about the Industrial Revolution, right? We're not in a software-based society. You have to pay for something that's a complete product. You go manufacture a car, or even even like editing software back in the day. You bought Final Cut for $1,000 or whatever because it was a completed product. Because the way manufacturing worked and the way everything worked was you didn't buy a partial product. But as value becomes increasingly digital, the product is never really complete. It's constant iteration. Software development is just constant iteration, and so it's just a much better allocation of capital from the consumer perspective and a society perspective, where we can actually see where people's attention and time and needs and wants are truly going. So I think a huge benefit with regards to that. I got to jump, homies. Godspeed.
Thanks for jumping on, brother.
Deuces.
Trying to keep these to, the time frame. So if we have like 9 more minutes, and I'm not sure how many people are actually still watching right now. If you are still watching right now, drop something in the chat. If you want us to talk about anything. But I think what's interesting about the three of us is we, actually all 4 of us, but Zach had to jump off. But the, how do you think it's going to change Hollywood? We're already kind of seeing it with like the fires just kind of decimated, and I'm very curious how many. Like, I know Altadena and I know Palisades had a lot of OGs. There's a lot of OG grips and gaffers and just talented people that are just like, what do we do? Do we stay? Do we go? Because the town is not picked back up.
Not only is the town not picked up, I mean, even further out than LA and Hollywood, the industry is super slow. I mean, they had multiple strikes. And if you think about it, I don't mean to disparage the unions too hard, because there are so many good people in the unions, and those people have made the movies that I love, but they're working in a very antiquated system, and I'm talking beyond what AI is going to do to the industry. The distribution platforms are totally screwed up, and that threw off what the stories that people were making, the actual movies, the shows, and everything. There's nothing. Well, there's not nothing, but there's tons and tons of tentpole movies, sequels, all these things that are kind of just this garbage. They're really great stories that we loved in the heyday of when we were teenagers, which was basically the late 90s, early 2000s. A lot of those types of movies aren't even being made right now.
Mm-hmm.
As things get easier, this is the positive part, as things get easier for us to make movies, there have been so many ideas I've had recently where I can go out, I can shoot some things, I can make other things using AI tools. I can make a product. Now, if I can make a movie right now, I could put it on Amazon. There's lots of different platforms. I could sell it to one of these streaming platforms. Yeah, but we're getting to a point where we're going to be able to make movies, and this might be a transitionary time period, but we're going to be able to put them on a site like IndieHub, and the cost of making the product is going to go down, and we're going to be able to sell them. The issue is that it basically makes for a middle class of movie makers, as opposed to the people that were successful in movie making for the last 100 years were the upper class. If you could successfully make a movie, it was riches. You were going to be a rich, wealthy person if you were a filmmaker with a successful movie that went theatrical, or when home video was a thing, and then when these streaming platforms were buying movies from people. And we're passing that time period right now. Of course, there's still going to be those movies to some degree, but we are entering a place now where people can make a pretty decent livable income making movies and selling them directly to people to watch. Of course, you guys know exactly where that's headed, to where it's going to become what we've talked about before with the whole choose your own adventure type movie making, and basically AI is just going to make the movie for you, and it's going to take the filmmaker out of it. But for a time period, and I think we're already there, basically you can make a movie for very little money. You can make back more than you spent on it, and you can make a living as a filmmaker, which is exciting if you're just purely a filmmaker for the love of it, because the people who have the actual talent are going to be able to just choose to do that job and make a living at it. Maybe you guys have a perspective on it. I don't know how long that's going to last. I don't think it's going to be a very long time period.
One thing that I think is I think the key, or perhaps the key to all of this and how it goes forward, is the price feedback mechanism, which is you release a movie on like IndieHub, it's going to pay you in sats, right?
Right.
Immediately. And you're going to be like, wait a second, people stopped watching my movie 13 minutes in. And I know that because I can see all the stats and I can see like, this is where I stopped getting paid. Right. So what was wrong with minute 13? And you go and you look at minute 13, you're like, wait a second. Oh fuck. There's a boom. It's just like the boom is like in the guy's forehead, right? It's just like some stupid mistake that you just whatever. So you recut the movie and you release it on IndieHub again, version 2, and it's like, oh cool. The audience made it past minute 13, but now they get stuck on minute 30. And you can kind of like get into this zone of like, wait a second, we have unlimited iteration on movie making itself, and then we get this feedback loop of price mechanism on movie making itself, and the consequences there that Netflix doesn't have to like whatever just do buckshot at a wall and see what hits and what doesn't hit. They can like literally incrementally and systematically just kind of give the filmmakers the tools and the resources they need to do that, and then the product cycle is just like so much shorter, so much more feedback for all the artists to get cool. Oh wait, this doesn't work, that does work, let's go with that thing, you know.
What you're describing already is happening, by the way. I've been a part of a movie where we changed some things and just re-uploaded it. Nobody even knew that we changed it. And I mean, you could also argue the movie Cats. Do you guys remember that one? Mm-hmm. That when they originally reached
the great glorious Cats.
The cats had buttholes.
Yeah,
it's true. Look it up. And they took them out.
Yeah,
they re-released
man. Thank you.
They did a similar thing with Sonic the Hedgehog too, right? Where it was like they released the
they
images
totally
of which Sonic was going to look like, and everyone was like, "What the?" So they changed it, and that was
Oh man, what's interesting about actually, you guys just gave me an idea that I hadn't thought about until just right now, but it's the what's most exciting for me is the value. Other people will value your time more. And says the guy who wants to start podcasts with people who have other things to do, but you guys are graciously sitting on here for an hour. But like that's the thing about that is actually advertising has to get better. It actually has to add value to you. It can't just be like screaming at you. It goes to, Alex Hormozy, if you know who he is, he's the guy at acquisitions.com, but his whole premise of the $1 million offer, and it's like creating a category of one for what you're selling. But what's interesting about that is like, I fully see a thing like IndieHub where instead of charging, like CPM, where it's like cost per 1,000 views or whatever, or cost per million views or whatever, you're going to start seeing an ad pay, or like you're going to start paying for ads as an advertiser based on completion. And it's not going to be a forced completion type thing. It's going to be like a, pay for completion thing. And I do see a world where we start seeing at Brave, the Brave browser tried to do it and it didn't really succeed with their Brave token. But they're like, oh, we'll pay you for being served ads.
Who would have guessed?
Coming. I do think that's coming though, because I think there is a world where you can say, hey, I would love to oh, you want to pay me to talk to me? Cool. Where are you seeing that with Nostr? Like I get zaps all the time, and I haven't been on Nostr in a minute. Like people literally zap with an ad in the memo field, right? And it's like, cool. I just got paid to be advertised to. That is the future, in my opinion. But it goes both ways, where it's like the advertisers are only going to pay for the amount of the ad viewed, and so it's going to force the quality of the ads to get better to entertain you and grip you for longer, which means they need to add more value for longer. And so I think it's just going to be, the Bitcoin standard is the rising tide that makes the entirety of life better, in my opinion. From the ads that you are served and that you get to watch to the content that you consume. And I think we get back to patronage. I think what's going to be interesting is like Christopher Nolan in a Bitcoin future still has blockbuster hits, because mass swaths of people are patronizing his movie.
Yeah,
And they're like,
we'll
I'm
do
gonna,
anything to see his films. Yeah.
yeah,
And you know that this feedback loop continues. He can also acquire the best talent and the best producers and the best locations and everything else because he's got the brand recognition. It's
Yep.
Christopher Nolan, right?
Yep.
And you know when you get into the cycle of the positive virtuous feedback loop of seeing how your content is like actually getting monetized and what people like and what they want to see or whatever, you're riding that stairway up as well to become a, you know, obviously it's going to be you're going to need a lot of skill to become the next Christopher Nolan, but you're on that path.
It's going to be interesting. Like, we have such a fiat mentality about everything having to do with money, using credit cards, taking on loans. We take on loans because we know that the loan is going to be cheaper to service because of inflation and all this stuff. And like for me, I'm freelance. I work, you know, as a cinematographer, as like my bread and butter work. And oftentimes I will negotiate a rate with somebody. They're going to pay me X amount of money. I go do the job. And then a few days later, when I remember, I send them the invoice, and then eventually I'm trusting them to pay me by either doing an ACH or physically mailing me a check or whatever. And it's like I can instinctually feel that everything about how that works currently is going to change when there's a Bitcoin standard. People are they're not going to trust you to send them Bitcoin. I don't think. I think it'll be like in a very similar way to the way that you're paying to watch a movie on IndieHub with a certain amount of sats. The way that we work is going to be very, very similar. It's like, if you want my services, you're going to pay me right now by paying me in sats. And it's going to completely change our relationship with how we even accept payment for what we do. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, that takes us to 3:30. You guys gonna jump off here?
yeah. I think it'd be probably good to jump and wrap, because I think, you know, we need to give ourselves some good bounds and start trying to figure out what this thing is. I think this is what Bitcoin is for me, or like part of this is like the journey of like figuring this out live in the open. I'm realizing there's value and not value for other people. There's like value for us, but not value for others.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had somebody watch our last one, and he seemed to have enjoyed it. One thing he didn't like watching on X, because every time he got pulled away from it, he'd go back and be like, "Where was I?"
Oh, I gotta restart. I need to get the YouTube up. I have the YouTube, but you know, I do love the Martini's Up idea and name for the Indie Hub thing, and I think one of the things about Better by Bitcoin though is like it doesn't tell me what it is, and so, you know, maybe we need a name change, but I think we're still trying to figure out what it is. But if it's like, you know, better life the Bitcoin way, like the Bitcoin better way or whatever it is, I don't know.
I really like Better by Bitcoin because everything
good.
gets better by Bitcoin being a part of that thing. And you'd better buy Bitcoin because we're going to have hyper Bitcoinization. And if you want wealth in the future, you need to have Bitcoin now. I don't know.
Or or if you want food in the
love it.
future, you better get Bitcoin now. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, just don't try to buy eggs. I've been everywhere and there's no eggs.
Yeah, no, it's
The Vons here in Eagle Rock has a ton of eggs.
That's good. Costco did not. I literally walked in and like there's like a flurry of people trying to buy eggs, and there's one dude had like the last one is like walking around Costco and people are like waiting for him to like leave his cart. Dude's like 80 years old and these people are like goink his eggs. I was like, you guys are terrible.
But I think that we're going to get the flow as we're doing these podcasts, and there is so much value in our collective wisdom. I mean, each one of us has put years and hours per day into studying Bitcoin and really thinking through how it applies to our lives and how we can better our lives by having Bitcoin being a part of our lives. And the majority of people have not done that. And so they need the knowledge that we have in our brains. And I mean, it's going to take us a little while to figure out how to brand ourselves and everything so that people know what they're getting when they just click on this. But the value is there. The value is within us and what we're doing. So don't sell yourself short. People will enjoy watching this. There's lots of people that want to watch us talk about these subjects for an hour.
I was actually thinking about that actually very specifically of the I do think a focus, like we just picked a question, we're kind of riffing on it. And we talked last week at the meetup. I know you couldn't meet at Anton, but I think we should try to do 5 days a week. I think we should try to have everybody own a day, or like 4 days a week or 3 days a week. I think we did 5 days a week. If everybody owned a day and they did like 30 minutes or an hour on their subject matter, where were they as me, a subject matter expert? Because I do think you talking about how cinematography is going to get better because of a Bitcoin standard, Bondor talking about engineering and also like ADing, less people are going to die from heart attacks and stress, panic attacks.
I mean, or people are going to, less people, in terms of ADing, let's be honest, less people are going to die because of getting run over by trains and shot by guns and that whole thing.
Oh, but I would love it. Like, for me, I really want to dive into the advertising piece of it. That's literally how I filter everything. Every time I look at anything, I'm like, how do you sell that? How do you pitch that? What's the story? How do you like that? That's just the first thing I go to because I've been doing it for 20 years and I love it. I really do love trying to crack that proverbial nut of how do I get somebody to feel something about this brand, about this product, and then see the full benefit of it. Like see, oh, wow, this would make my life better. And I do enjoy doing that. And so I just want to, I want to do that more and actually like just dive into like, it's like, the advertising. It's like, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you tune in, you're going to get this. And I do think we should probably have a more Hollywood slant because that's just what we all have experience in. But
absolutely, I agree.
And maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's like, Hollywood better buy Bitcoin for Hollywood or something. I don't know.
Yeah, we're all in Hollywood and we're all representing. We're like the vanguard of the new Hollywood as well. And that,
but you can buy Bitcoin. We don't limit you buying Bitcoin. So not that vanguard, like the word vanguard.
I don't even know what the word means exactly. Like if you asked me the definition, I couldn't give it to you, but I feel like I'm using it in the right context. I could be wrong. We're leading the charge for that thing that is what Hollywood will become, like the good part of the cycle. I mean, I really think that we're in that time period where Hollywood was when silent films were picking up steam to where they went to the pinnacle of silent films. That's where I think we are right now in the cycle, personally.
According to Grok, the term vanguard means literal and historically. Originally, it refers to the foremost part of an advancing army or military force, the troops who led the way and are at the front line. Yeah, the vanguard.
And I think part of that, like, this is what killed my participation in the stream last time, was this point, which is Hollywood dead? And I was trying to make the case that Hollywood is not dead. And I've thought about this more. I put this tweet out, but it's like California is the most incredible, dynamic, ambitious, consequential, and rich place on earth. And the reason it's the most consequential is because we have tech and we have entertainment. We export everyone else's stories. This is where we determine what is meaningful for everyone else on earth.
Yeah.
Right?
How do we maintain that?
Think about that.
Because I'll be honest, I don't know. I agree now, but how do we maintain that?
Not only maintain it, reclaim it too. I mean, it's been going down the tubes.
Better word.
With crazy leftist progressivism. They've been literally burning it to the ground.
The only thing that's standing in the way of California and LA is the retarded communism that is, seeping out of the pores of everything here.
Yeah.
Now, why is there retarded communism? Like, why is all that? It's because of fiat. Like, it's because California has more representatives than any other state, which means we get more money and we have more of these bullshit NGOs and like all the other like garbage that comes out of Washington because we are, again, then closer to the money printer.
Yep.
Being closer to the money printer means we have the most retarded communists here.
And then the most retarded people who are communists flock to California and to Los Angeles to just suckle off a little bit of that, like of the social programs, and to get like the little drippings that fall off of the money that's being embezzled by the people who are at the top of these organizations that are taking this printed fiat garbage money.
Look at Stacey Abrams. Like, Jesus.
So how do you fix this? Well, the way you fix this is Bitcoin. Bitcoin literally is a egalitarian. There is no money printer. Nobody can print money. Nobody can stop Bitcoin. It is a like force multiplying, like retarded communist ender. Like this is the end of retarded communists because nobody can do anything about it. There's no tit you can suckle off of. It's done. Like that whole world is over as long as we start, pushing on Bitcoin.
The complacent people who will watch the auditing of Fort Knox and just be eating Cheetos and drinking their Starbucks horrifically burnt coffee beans,
which is just sugar now.
Yeah, those people, they cannot stop, even though they're not aware of what's coming, they can't stop what's coming. And so hyper Bitcoinization is going to take place. And like I was saying, as this is happening and people are just like, I can't stop this, they're going to be looking to people like us to tell them what the heck is happening.
Yeah, I think this goes actually into why I started Cypherpunk Cinema. I love that my camera always freezes.
I know your camera.
It's just like your camera dies every 30 minutes. Mine just freezes.
Yeah, it's just a little better than mine,
Dude, it's wild. And actually, it's every computer I'm on. I have different computers. It's like it's something with my internet provider. Like my ISP at a certain point, it's just like, nah, we're gonna turn that port off for like 5 seconds.
We don't need this one.
We don't need that one. But no, what we need to tell Bitcoin lore. Like we need more Bitcoin lore stories. Like we need, and that's literally what the Bitcoin mining thing I want to be doing. Like and I just need to figure out how I can have enough money to quit my day job to the company that I'm running, my own day job. But how do we tell these stories and get them out there in such a way that we can have people feel like I feel the best series that just kind of fell flat because people the twist really broke a lot of people was The Man in the High Castle. The Man in the High Castle season 1 episode 1 through whatever had everybody wrapped with attention. And then as soon as they, and spoiler alert, turn it off if you haven't seen it before, like as soon as they said it was an alternate reality and it wasn't real, the show just kind of folded on itself. Because the problem is people felt lied to. And I think what makes like Snow Crash and Chuck Palahniuk, all these like great like authors and books and things like that from the past era so good, Christopher Nolan, is they show you a reality. 1984, they show you a reality that helps you kind of unpack some things, but they need to just live in that reality and not have an out. Like you need to burn the ships of the story kind of thing. And I think we haven't done that enough with Bitcoin. Like we need to be telling Bitcoin future stories. The Consensus Network guys are trying to do that, and I think they're doing a good job. But we need those stories to get out there, and the challenge just now is the capital to do it. Diatribe over.
Good episode.
All right, team.
Sweet.
Till next time.
See you guys. See you in a week.
Peace.
Better buy Bitcoin.
Better buy Bitcoin.
Got a good thing coming, and it's all I need.